Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guest today is Jim Smid, the Chief Technology Officer for Iron Bow Technologies. I'm Tom Temin. And Jim, let's begin at the beginning here. When people talk about artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning, ML, robotic process automation, RPA, they tend to talk about them like three undifferentiated blueberries in a bowl, but really they're rather different and distinct in the way they're used and the way they're applied. So maybe sort those out for us.
Sure. Yeah, it's, I guess, the new cloud, right? There's a lot of terminology thrown around that people want to use it synonymously, and it's really not. They're related terms, and we can go into a little bit on each of them. So artificial intelligence, in a nutshell, is when you're trying to have a computer replicate the actions or decisions being made by a person. And great example of that might be a self-driving car. That's a pretty self-evident. You're going to replace a person in a car. There's a lot of things that go into that. Machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence. They get talked about as if they're exactly the same, but machine learning is actually a subset of artificial intelligence. It's usually when you're using a lot of data to do a very narrow type of a decision, to do something very specific. So a great example as it relates to the self-driving car is using machine learning to automatically brake the car. And the brakes get applied for a variety of reasons. And the car is certainly going to behave differently over time as it ages, as the conditions are different. Machine learning allows your car to be the sensor and to send that information back to the mothership for processing with all the other sensors and cars that are out there, as well as making decisions and doing things real time. So that gets combined with a lot of other type of artificial intelligence to do that self-driving. You talked about robotic process automation, and that's evolving, which I think is what some of the confusion is at this point. Really, robotic process automation, it's been around for a while, and it's really automating very mundane tasks. There's usually not a lot of intelligence in exactly what it's doing. So you think about a good example of that might be just data entry. I get data from, could be anywhere, from an email, from different tasks that come through every day, and a person has to go and just take those and put those into another system. That can be automated. That's going to certainly simplify things. It's also going to make it very repeatable, and it's going to give you accuracy. So there's great places to do RPA. I think where the confusion comes in is that it is automation, and they're starting to talk and use the term now intelligent automation. And what they mean is that they're trying to marry kind of AI with what's happening within RPA. They're trying to make it more intelligent. There's a couple different ways you can do that with RPA. For example, you can make the tools themselves smarter. They're starting to have some machine learning, some recognition. A lot of times I would use RPA if I'm going to, let's say, drive a website. I basically am recording the actions that I'm doing, and the RPA tool is watching what I do, and it can then replicate that. It runs my pointer. It looks just like someone's taken over my computer, and it does that. When you end up with a web page that has, it's a more complex web page, sometimes the tools, they don't understand where things should go. So something that's very obvious to me, like maybe a calendar, and I have to put project codes or something like that against that and put my time in. That might be very complicated for an RPA tool to understand what that is. By embedding better tools and putting AI into the tool itself, it gets better at recognizing things that you or I might intuitively understand about what we're seeing. The second way they're starting to make more intelligent automation with our RPA is to give you more and more tools to make decisions and to embed more decision-making process into the automation. So making it more complex rather than just doing data entry, more of the if-then type of a thought process. When would I do this? Why would I do this? And as we're going to talk about, I think with AI in general and automation, it's usually start small and kind of build. It's an iterative process to make it better as you go along.
And it's safe to say then, based on what you said about bringing intelligence into RPA, that it's much more than simply scripting, as we've been understanding a lot of automated processes for some time.
It is, and it can be. It can start as scripting, and then certainly evolve from that. So it kind of gets all different flavors in there. You can do things that are very simple and automate them, and get some real value out of that. But I think that value continues to build the more intelligence you put into it, and the smarter the tools become.
And as often is the case with these new and emerging technologies and applications, people tend to start with the tools and say, what should I do with them? Because I feel like I need to have these because everybody's talking about it. Your thesis is, I guess, best described as figure out what it is your problem is. And so, what's a good methodology for someone that has the sense these could be useful to my agency and to my process, but I don't know how to proceed from there?
Sure. I mean, like most IT projects that we talk to people about, it's not about the tools themselves. I can start with a tool, and not not everything is a nail. So I don't always need a hammer. It's important to, as you said, really look at the business owner or the mission owner. We have a lot of customers that anywhere from the Department of Defense down to logistics agencies. We have commercial agencies. We have healthcare. So I'll try to get into a little bit about that with each of them, but it's always about talking to the boots on the street, right? It's the people who are living the problem, who understand what's going in day to day. The IT manager, the CIO, they don't understand what really those problems are, and so they don't really understand what the outcomes need to be. It's not important to pick the tool until you understand where's the data that's coming from, what kind of outcomes are you looking to get, what kind of problems are you trying to solve, and you can always back into that later with different tools that can be applied. And there's a variety of different tools that can be brought to bear with these.
And I guess you want to avoid the situation of starting too limited. Say you use an RPA tool, for example, but it could be that with some more intelligence, you could do a lot more with the problem at hand if you had a more capable tool that has that learning and adaptability component that you might not find in a basic RPA.
Yeah, that's a great point. And really, where we see RPA a lot of places is that it's used for kind of a proof of value, and they end up replacing some of what they do with RPA later. Think about what I talked about, that you're tying up my computer to run RPA many times. So it's actually going to run the website, and those tools they use you to tie up my computer resources. I could potentially, if I found there was a lot of value in that, I could attack that in different ways. I could write RPA scripts that didn't tie up my computer, or I could write things directly to APIs, or I could write triggers in databases. There's a variety of ways that you can embed automation. And you don't want to pick the tool up front. RPA might be a good thing for prototyping things. It also might be a good thing long term. You don't really know until you understand a little bit more about the data and the process and what's all going to be involved.
And what's a good organizational approach to getting these types of projects started in terms of who should be involved, who should ask what questions, and also the issue of people suspicious of this type of technology thinking, well, there goes my job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you've hit on a couple different areas there. The first piece is really just making sure you're talking to the right folks. For a good example, we do a lot with the healthcare, we do a lot with the VA, and we're not talking to the IT folks, we're talking to the clinicians about what's the day in the life look like for you. And as I talked about these things kind of evolving, uh, that really started from a simple problem that we needed patients to be able to remotely be able to see their doctor and be able to see specialists, and just provide better health care to them. So that really tied into a lot of technologies and convergence of technologies that we specialize in. One of those is certainly around collaboration and video, and making sure you can bring that experience like what we're doing today and everyone's become more familiar with COVID. How do you bring that into a clinical piece, and what peripherals are required for that? So, starting with a handful of peripherals that you could do a routine doctor visit with a specialist or someone that lives out of state, or if you're in a rural area. That's a good example where that problem, then as you solve problems, you see that complexity starts to build on itself, and you get better and better outcomes. Because think about healthcare and what's happening with IoT and what's happening again in this convergence of technologies, 5G, for example. 5G means we're going to have lower latency, we're going to have more bandwidth to go out to rural areas. IoT means we're going to have better and better wearables. Many of these are health related. So I'm going to begin to start getting additional data from my patients. What that all means is it all ties back into what we're talking about: automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning. It's really about being able to make sure that you're making intelligent decisions based on all of the information at your disposal. And as more information gets here and we can get it done faster, really the possibilities are endless of things that can be done with it. You brought up something. I'll just relate it again, I guess, to healthcare, because I think that's a simple one people can understand. Because your question is about who needs to be involved, and it's the specialists in that area. If you bring in a data scientist, they're not necessarily going to understand healthcare. So you think about machine learning as an example, again, as that subset of AI. You think about a dermatologist, and just the number one diagnosed cancer in the country is skin cancer. Well, there's a lot of work that's been done with machine learning. The more data you give the computer to recognize a high definition picture of problem areas on the skin, you've now gotten to where these programs are able to perform at or above the level of the clinicians themselves. That's where you start building that trust in, right? That it's always this process of understanding what you're getting, seeing what the results are. You're going to build that trust over time. That doesn't just happen. You or I probably would not be comfortable just taking a picture on our computer and right now saying, well, I'm good to go. I don't need to go and see my dermatologist ever again. That's just not going to happen yet, but we're getting there. And that trust is being built, and it's being built because you're including the doctors, you're including the dermatologists, you're including the people that are specialists. And once they buy in, we buy in, and those things just become, I think healthcare is just so ripe for places that we can do a lot.
And just a quick question on that team idea. It might even be wise to go deeper to the people that do the scheduling, because what VA found was that in setting up video interviews, one of the toughest problems was getting two different automated systems for appointments to operate well, so that it wasn't all this complication for the veteran trying to seek service. So you want to cast a wide net with respect to the people you bring into the planning.
You're absolutely right. I mean, logistics is an area that AI can be really powerful in, and just data analytics in general. And you hit it right on the head. I mean, when you start talking about what we do in our telehealth side of the business, I've got to make sure that the doctor's available, that I've got very expensive equipment that's available, that the resources are all there. That whole scheduling part is really, really critical. And what we found was that the customer was coming back to us and saying, how do we make sure we're getting the most out of our investment? If I could do 12 of these a day and I'm only doing 3, how do I do that? And it's exactly with what we're talking about. It's making sure we're collecting the data that's already available to us. We're correlating it. We're putting it in to a way that it's easily understood, and we can get the signal of that. The signal being, I could schedule this every 45 minutes. I don't have to wait every 2 hours to make sure nothing happens. Average time is 15 minutes. Longest time is 30 minutes. I can get this turned back around. So scheduling, logistics, it's certainly critical, and not just in the healthcare field, but across all of our customers. It's some of the more mundane things that really have a profound impact on the overall mission.
My guest today is Jim Smid. He's the Chief Technology Officer for Iron Bow Technologies. I'm Tom Temin. This is Federal Insights, Repurposing Manpower Through Automation, sponsored by Iron Bow Technologies in partnership with Dell Technologies here on Federal News Network.